Welcome everyone. My name is Deb Kramer and I'm with Keep Coyote Creek Beautiful. I want to welcome you to the Coyote Creek Watershed Tour. We will share the beauty, wonder, and people who enjoy this creek in the southern San Francisco Bay Area. Today we'll learn about the birds of the bay and those that migrate here and how we learn about them. So, again, my name is Deb Kramer. I'm the Executive Director of Keep Coyote Creek Beautiful, and I love being outdoors. And what better place to be than in Santa Clara Valley? I'll be your moderator today, and our team worked with Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society to curate these programs. We will take questions from you. Simply type them in the chat section of Zoom, and we'll pose them to the presenters. Now let me introduce our team. So first we have Carolyn Knight. She works for the Audubon Society as the Education and Outreach Specialist, where she gets to use her degree in wildlife biology to share her enthusiasm for nature with the community. Behind the scenes, we have Myra Catalan Orozco, Keep Coyote Creek Beautiful's outreach volunteer. Next, we have Katie LaBarbera. She's got a PhD and has studied the behaviors of juncos, wrens, and tree frogs. She now co-runs San Francisco Bay Bird Observatory's Coyote Creek Field Station bird banding operation, a job that lets her introduce cool birds to cool people and learn from both. Behind the camera is Coulter Cook, Keep Coyote Creek Beautiful's interpretive coordinator. Katie will share with us about the birds we catch, bird banding, and the history of the banding station. Before we get started with the program, I'd like to give you a little background about the Coyote Creek. It starts up at Henrico State Park and flows into Anderson Lake in a backwards J towards Coyote Valley. You'll notice that it also passes through downtown San Jose and into Milpitas, which is where the mouth of the Coyote Creek is. The yellow dot indicates where our presenters are.
So today we're going to be keeping an eye out for migratory species as well as our residential birds, the ones that are here all year round. So we can get exploring some of the fantastic ecosystems that's along Coyote Creek. So this location is at the intersection of Grant and McCarthy Boulevard. It's right on the edge of Milpitas. It's the Milpitas Coyote Creek Trailhead. So that's what you can search on Google Maps if you're trying to find it. As you can see right now, there's some really great springtime foliage coming in. There's a ton of bird activity. So if you come out with your binoculars, you're guaranteed to pick up at least 25 or so species for your eBird list. But yeah, that's where you can find it if you're looking for it on the maps. So one of the great things about visiting a creek at this time of year is we're seeing so much growth in our plants that's really bringing out a lot of activity in our birds as well. Spring has really started, and so with that we get a ton of activity as birds start to partner up and breed. So you hear a lot more singing. You see a lot more activity in terms of breeding displays, but we do have swallows that are starting to catch bugs. And way up high there, we've got a turkey vulture. And it's looking for something a little bit more substantial than the flying insects that the swallows are chasing.
But this is Coyote Creek Field Station. We're part of the San Francisco Bay Bird Observatory. We've been banding birds since 1982. Not me personally, because I was negative years old at that point. The knowledgeable bander showing you how we process the birds here was Tom Stewart, who's been a longtime volunteer here we're almost entirely volunteer staffed. So we provide training. It takes generally more than a year to get enough knowledge and skill with working with the birds to collect data. We always put the birds' welfare first. We're all bird lovers first. And so whenever we collect data on the birds, we know what to look for. If the bird starts looking stressed, we immediately let them go. We're very careful about that. But these data sets let us look at how birds are responding to changes in the weather. Those recent fires, we can look for effects of the recent fires on the birds. We can look for effects of drought. We can look for effects of the increasing land development around here. We're very lucky to be able to band right here on Coyote Creek. We have a patch of remnant riparian habitat, so river habitat that is, that has remained untouched for a very long time. That's very rare in the Bay Area, and so that's one reason why we get a lot of birds here, is because we have this very rare bit of habitat right along Coyote Creek. The banding station is almost entirely staffed by volunteers. These are folks from the community, from as close as just down the street and from as far away as a 2-hour drive. And we have all ages of people, all levels of scientific knowledge, from complete non-scientists to folks with PhDs, folks who've been birders their whole lives or who have never really thought that hard about birds. They all come together and we teach them here, so you don't have to come in with any training, and it's a lot of information to learn. We teach it slowly, and so volunteers always think that they won't be able to learn it, and then at the end they're just absolute experts. And it's great fun. We're all here because we love the birds, but it's also really fun to meet all the people. So here you see a house finch being processed by our volunteer Tom. So you'll notice the bright red on this bird, on his head and above his tail and his rump. That means he's a male. He's got a band on his leg. You may recognize him from your bird feeders. These are common birds at feeders, but actually pretty uncommon for us. And we keep them in bags when we're not processing them. Beautiful red. Got red on the rump there. Okay, ready to go?
There you go. Very nice. This bird weighs 31.6 grams. I double check, I have everything. And I am going to release this bird. Take the camera with me.
So if we go back to our migratory birds, we get to see a lot of turnover in terms of the seasons. As we're leaving the winter time right now, we're losing some of our wintering birds, like the ferruginous hawk, which likes to hang out in the Coyote Valley. And this is a really gorgeous bird. It's a pale white and cream with rusty orange on the back, but it's only with us in the winter times. So we're starting to see them leave with the spring. And with the Pacific Flyway especially, we see a giant influx of waterfowl. So those are our ducks, our geese, things like the hooded mergansers that like to visit riparian systems like Coyote Creek. This is a fishing duck. So they've got really skinny bills that they use to catch fish, but the males have this fantastic hood. So as I was mentioning, our wintering birds are starting to leave us with the spring, but because of the fantastic wetlands and the riparian systems that we have that provide a ton of shelter for birds, as well as food and nesting opportunities, we are getting to see our spring and our summer migrants actually arrive right now. So one of these birds is the hooded oriole. Now, this is a bird about the size of a scrub jay. It's pretty sizable, but unlike the scrub jay, it's not blue and white. It's actually a bright orange and yellow and black. And this bird was actually just spotted the first of the season in our county down at Santa Teresa Park yesterday. This is a summer bird for us. We're really excited to see them because not only are they very, very colorful, but we've actually seen some range expansion from them. Moving further north, these are birds that really love palm trees to visit and actually nest in. So if you've got palm trees in your area, keep an eye on them. You're going to look for a giant splash of orange and black. And they'll actually visit orange trees as well as any hummingbird feeders that you've got out. We're also seeing a much smaller migratory bird moving through right now, and that's the Allen's hummingbird. So this is a really tiny little bird. They just migrate through. They don't stick around for very long, so there's only a couple of weeks of the year that we get to see them. But unlike our Anna's hummingbird, which is bright green with a pinkish red head and throat, this one has some really great rusty orange coloring on its chest and head. So those are some of the migratory birds that we're expecting to see coming in or are already starting to come in with the seasons. These guys can be a little bit trickier to see because unlike our wintering birds, they're not large hawks or geese or ducks. They take a little bit more searching out to find, but they're very colorful. They're absolutely charming birds. And our riparian systems are a really great spot to look for them. They're less likely to be spotted in your parks around the city. But if you have a good water source with lots of cover, lots of food, it's a really great spot to start birding. So we can get closer to some of these stands of trees and hopefully start searching out some of the local birds that are here. Right now we are kind of in between seasons right now. You've probably noticed the weather has turned spring-like. We're starting to see the leaves come out on the trees, but we're still technically in the wintertime. So many of our winter migratory birds are still present. Birds like our white-crowned sparrow, which you've probably noticed hopping around your homes in your yards or in your local parks. This is a small little brown bird, but if you look closely at its head, it's got zebra stripes. So that's always fun to spot. Now these birds hang out with us in the wintertime, and then once the weather starts to get really warm, they're going to be moving back up north. But we start to see them in the fall. They'll stick around for the wintertime, and then they'll move back up north to breed. Along, mixed in with the white-crowned sparrows, we can also find golden-crowned sparrows. As the name implies, they've got a bright yellow spot on the top of their head. It's always nice when the birds are appropriately named. It makes everybody's lives a lot easier. But both of those sparrows are most easily spotted by paying attention to the edges of trails or near bushes in the ground. They really like to hang out by the ground because that's where they're going to be foraging.
Okay, so we get a lot of sparrows, but as she was saying, we get migratory birds in the fall and spring, and then in the summer we get breeding birds. So pretty soon we're going to start seeing baby birds. And in fact, today we were catching some hummingbirds that are nesting. So yeah, it's almost breeding bird time. Tom's gonna maybe show some props to answer that question. So here are some of the different bird cups we have. They definitely don't all fit. If we put them in too big a cup, they will just fly away. And of course, we don't want to squeeze them. So we have a whole variety of sizes. We also have a whole variety of sizes of bands because we don't want it to fall over the foot, but we also don't want it to be too tight. So I'm not sure if you'll be able to see, but the diameter of those bands is quite different. And we measure each bird's legs to make sure that the bands are exactly the right size. Here's our bird leg measurer. And you can see the bands can get quite big. Those are for much bigger birds than we usually get. Here you see a data sheet, almost exactly like the data sheet that Tom was recording data on that golden crowned sparrow on. We've been recording these data as far back as the 80s, and the data sheet has changed very little. Each line on this sheet is a different bird. And we recorded its species, the number on its leg band, that individually identifying number, and then all the other numbers here are telling you things like the bird's wing length, how much fat it has, what age it is, what sex it is, and how much it weighs. In addition to this individual data sheet, we also have daily data sheets called summary sheets. Each day that we band, we record how long we had our nets open, which nets were open, what the weather was like, and then how many birds we got of each species. So you can see from this data sheet from December 1982, they caught bush tits, they caught golden crowned sparrows, just like that one you just saw. They caught fox sparrows, black phoebes, and a whole suite of other birds. You can imagine with these daily data sheets and these individual data sheets that we end up with a lot of data, and that is correct. We have very large filing cabinets full of these data. Here are some of our oldest data sheets, but we keep them going from 1982 all the way up to the ones that we are writing on right today. We keep the physical sheets just in case, but we've also entered them all into the computer so that we can run scientific analyses on these data.
So one of the birds that we've seen flying over the trail this morning a couple of times isn't actually a migratory bird, but it's a residential. And it's one that not a lot of people start to notice. And that's the western meadowlark. Now, these birds are really well known for their gorgeous song. They're a bird that likes grasslands, and they're about the size of a small chicken. So, yay big. But despite the fact that their backs are incredibly well camouflaged, if their backs are towards you, they are pretty much completely hidden in our grasses. Because remember, in California, we've got about 2 months of the year when our grass is green. But they've got a bright yellow chest, and they love to sing. So if we're in an area like the Ranch Drive Coyote Creek Trail, we'll actually see them flying between the grassy areas on both sides of the trail. Hello, we've got a red-tailed hawk that just flew. And landed nice in the trees for us. So the red-tailed hawk is another one of those very appropriately named birds. They're named for that reddish-orange tail that we get to see when they fly. But they can be a little bit tricky because they really like having as many color morphs as possible. So it takes them a couple of years to develop the typical adult plumage. And that's that dark brown back and head, and the paler underside with an orange tail that we get to see when it flies. But there are red-tailed hawks that are almost entirely dark brown. There are ones with a variety of paler shading.
One of the migratory birds we get here is the orange-crowned warbler. You might not be able to see why they're called that. They do have an orange crown, but it is very hidden under their head feathers, so you usually cannot see it. This individual is particularly neat because we know from the unique number on its leg band that we first banded it here at Coyote Creek Field Station in 2016. Since 2016, we've caught it about twice a year, every year. This picture is from just about a month ago in 2021. So this is a loyal returning customer of this bird, and we can track as its life goes on, how its condition changes, how long it lives. Hopefully we'll keep seeing it for many years to come.
Binoculars make it a lot easier to find a bird when it's on the wing. Scopes take a little while to set up, even if you're really familiar with the scope. It takes time to get it on a bird. Scopes are really great for a bird that is far away and sitting still, like the red-tailed hawk that's in the visual right now. But if I'm trying to look at a bird like a turkey vulture that's circling, or tree swallows that are high up in the sky, a scope isn't going to be able to do it. You just can't lock onto a bird that quickly. So binoculars are really great for a bird that's on the move, that's not super far away. A scope is really great if I want to be able to share a bird that is sitting still and is being especially cooperative, like this red-tailed hawk is. So one of the nice things about red-tailed hawks is that not only are they residential, but they really like taking up perches. They're kind of the ideal bird in terms of something you can catch in a scope. Every time, we've actually been walking along this trail with this red-tailed hawk for a little while, and every time we get too close, it pops down onto another pole. So this is about as close as it'll let us get before it decides to fly off again. So you may have noticed that the visual you're getting of the red-tailed hawk is just a dark circle. This is what happens when we do something called digiscoping, which is a fancy way of just saying you're holding your phone up to your binoculars or your scope. You can't really get a full field of view, but it's definitely a better way to magnify something than just zooming in on your phone. You get a lot better quality. You may have noticed that this red-tailed hawk is looking around a lot. Now, red-tailed hawks as predators are pretty equal opportunity in terms of what they'll actually eat. So these guys will feed primarily on mammals, things like ground squirrels, rats, mice, but they'll also go after lizards and snakes as well.
Just to explain some of the visuals you might have seen when Tom was banding that golden crowned sparrow. So I mentioned that we collect data. A lot of that is measurements, so things like measuring the wing. Sometimes we measure the bill. We also try to figure out what sex and age the bird is. So you might have noticed him doing something funny with the bird's head. We're actually looking, just moving the feathers aside, and birds have this very thin translucent skin, and you can actually see their skull under the skin. And when they're young, their skull is less strong and more translucent, kind of like human baby skulls, right? They're sort of squishy. Birds, they're not squishy, but you can see the difference. And so that's a trait that lets us figure out, is this a young bird or an older bird? Birds like the golden crowned sparrow that you saw that have these fancy decorations on their heads, we definitely note down that, you know, how much gold, how much black is there. We weigh them, and this lets us track all kinds of things. Folks have found that birds are evolving longer wings depending on their migratory behavior. We can look at, you know, bird condition. Are they gaining weight, losing weight? When birds migrate, they generally eat a lot and pack on a lot of fat before they leave so that they have those food stores for their migration. So if we catch a bird that's really fat, we know he's probably about to migrate. That golden crowned sparrow is likely to migrate in the near future. They winter here, but he'll migrate up north. That house finch is resident. He's not going anywhere. You probably see house finches at your feeders. They'll stay around here. And then we also get some birds flying through just in the spring or the fall that use this as a place to stop and eat some bugs on their way, either far north or far south. We also get, so I think Deb maybe has some pictures that she could put up, but we get white crowned sparrows, like Carolyn was talking about, those zebra stripe guys. We get song sparrows, Lincoln sparrows. They do all look like little brown birds from a distance for sure. But if you can start looking at the head, looking for those stripes, that'll help you see them from afar. And then we have it a little easy because we can look at them nice and up close.
Here you see a bushtit, our local angry little bird. If you look at the feet, you can see the band on the leg. Bushtits take our smallest size band because they have teeny tiny little legs. You can see it's a bright shiny new band, and engraved in that band are those numbers that we'll use to tell which exact individual this bushtit is. Bushtits are common around here, but they can be hard to see because they like to hide in bushes. They fly around in big flocks and talk to each other all the time. So if you can't see the birds, but you can hear a big flock of them being secret in a bush, that's probably bushtits. And a neat thing about bushtits is that you can tell what sex they are just by looking at them, because females have light colored eyes and males have dark colored eyes. So this right here is an angry female bushtit. And I don't actually know if she's angry. They just always look like this.
So I think you're seeing a photo now of a ruby-crowned kinglet. That's another bird we get a lot in the winter. They're really cool because the males have this bright red crown on the head, but usually it's hidden so they can hide it with their head feathers, and then they can show it when they want to be really angry. So that's pretty cool. And yellow-rumped warblers, these guys are, if you're seeing birds in your seed trees and your berry trees, they like to fly around in big flocks and eat berries. That's what this bird is. They're called yellow-rumped warblers because they do have yellow on the rump. Birders often also call them butterbutts affectionately. And we have two different subspecies here, Audubons and Myrtle's warblers, but those are both subspecies of the yellow-rumped warblers.
Do the subspecies of yellow-rumped warblers breed or do they interbreed?
They do both of those. Yeah, so in fact, earlier this morning, we caught what we think is probably a hybrid between the two subspecies. So usually they don't interbreed because otherwise we wouldn't even have two separate subspecies, but they definitely do seem to hybridize sometimes. And when we get a bird like that, it looks a little bit like one and a little bit like the other, just like you would think.
I just wanted to thank you very much for participating at the Coyote Creek Watershed Tour, where we looked at the birds of the Bay. Please thank our presenters, Katie LaBarbera from San Francisco Bay Bird Observatory and her videographer, Coulter Cook. Also, we thank Carolyn Knight from Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society and her videographer, Myra Catalan Orozco. Thanks so much for joining us.